From the Black Swan Media Studios, deep inside a secret underground bunker, we're speaking to freedom-loving patriots from all around the country and the world. Welcome to the Resistance. This is John Crump, live.
We are broadcasting live on every platform right now, including Rumble. On March 3rd, we are going Rumble exclusive for the actual live stream. It'll be uploaded to YouTube the day after, so everyone in the Replay Mafia can watch it the day after. But let me bring on our co-host, Flying Rich. How you doing?
Crump, I see you edited the thumbnail.
Yes, you thought I wasn't gonna...
So I had this, John Crump in the suit shirt picture in the lower left corner, and he edited that.
Yes, do you want to show the thumbnail?
Let's see, can I? Let's see, I gotta click like 7 things. YouTube, share. So, yeah, that's the thumbnail.
Yeah, you thought I was.
So you got make it a face like that.
You thought you were gonna be able to trick me, did you?
I didn't think it was a trick. I just thought it was like, hey, let's use the John Crump in the suit photo.
Yeah, and did it work?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'll just remove you. Doesn't matter to me. All right, so
our guest is going to be joining a little late.
Guest is going to be joining a little bit late today. We're going to be talking about the things that go on in the government. We're going to be talking about J6. So let's see if we get kicked out of here. Thank you for the 60 people over on Rumble watching right now. Hopefully more will join. But yeah, we're going to be talking about J6, and we are going to we're going to be discussing whether they were political prisoners or not, or if they should have been in jail for committing crimes against the United States, whether it was an insurrection, and the Trump pardons. Because there's a lot of people that like the Trump pardons, and there's some that don't like the Trump pardons. So we're going to figure out what is up with that.
Well, Biden pardoned a stupid amount of people. He pardoned people that weren't under indictment or criminally charged yet. He gave blanket retroactive pardons to his family, to Fauci, to the J6 committee members that deleted all sorts of records. I believe, let's see, what is it? Sunlight is the best disinfectant, is the saying. That if, why can't we see those J6 records that people deleted? What's wrong? What were you hiding? And just like Maxine Waters is yelling her full brain out, that we need to see what's going on in there. What are they doing behind closed doors? How come? It's like, well, why don't you want Elon Musk to see what's going on and shining a light on things? He's not hiding things. And the one person's yelling, Elon Musk's gonna steal your identity. He's gonna steal your social security check. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah,
but I love the crazies. I love what. So how do you tell people? It's like, hey, we've been stealing from the American people forever, from the taxpayers. We don't want you noticing it, though.
Yeah, of course they don't. And looks like we have our guest here.
Hey, Suzanne, how's it going?
Good. Sorry, it took me a minute. I had to figure out how to log back into my YouTube. I've been that medical truth. I pretty much have not been using that for a while, so it took me a minute. Good to see you guys.
Gotcha. How's everything going with you?
Well, I wish it was going better. We still have hostages. We still have 6 January 6ers. In fact, today, Elias Katsianis has just had to surrender himself to incarceration for his January 6th related search charges. And so we are back at 6. We were down to 5 yesterday, and now we are back at 6 today.
Oh shoot! Wow! Wow!
I did not hear about that.
Yeah, no, the media has been pretty silent, and I think, for the most part, we've had a lot of winning. There's a lot of success going on with so many of the things. I really want to just enjoy what the president has been doing since he's gotten elected. But unfortunately, what we've been working on is securing the release of 6, then 5, and now 6 again, January 6 defendants who have been pardoned, but they are still incarcerated for search-related charges by the same January 6 FBI agents, the same corrupt DOJ that investigated them and charged them for January 6. These charges are related to those searches, and for those reasons that we've got several individuals still incarcerated, including Green Beret decorated veteran Jeremy Brown.
Yeah.
What is a search-related charge? I'm sorry, John. What is a search-related charge?
Right. So when the FBI comes and raids your house, they will then search your house. And then when they raid your house for January 6th, so let's take the case of Benjamin Martin. He was living with his girlfriend at the time. His search-related charge is for firearms that he was not allowed to possess and did not possess. They were his girlfriend's firearms in his girlfriend's safe in his girlfriend's house. In fact, the FBI, rather than get a warrant and get the code so they could open the safe, they used the jaws of life. They brought the jaws of life into the house to pry open the safe and then charge Benjamin Martin with the antique and family heirloom firearms that belonged to his girlfriend and her father. So these are the kind of charges that when I say J6 related charges, they are search charges. They're charges related to that search. But clearly, as you can see, equally corrupted. And in many cases, because they are federalized charges and often even on the January 6th indictment, the presidential pardon should be applying, and it is not for some of these guys.
So, a warrant, I mean, when you get a warrant for somebody, like, all right, J6 basically trespassing, you get a warrant, isn't it for the individual, for seizure of the individual, not to, like, break into every safe in the house?
Yeah, you would, yes. This is what is so unfortunate about the January 6th situation is every time we tell some component of the lawfare the January 6th
Hold on, I'm looking it up.
This is what that we come across. They're like, well, how is that possible? That's completely unconstitutional. It's completely unlawful, and we agree, and it is. And it is unlawful to charge somebody else with firearms. It is unlawful to say someone possesses the firearms when, in fact, they have no access to those firearms. All of those things.
Hold on, I got it right here. It says, Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure on their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
Correct. And exactly what they're supposed to be looking for, what they're seizing. These are not the kind of warrant. These are not the kind of searches that we are seeing with these January 6 cases that we have seen across the board, 1,600 plus cases. The FBI does not follow any of those things. They do not show up with a list of things that they're looking for, because they'd have to include your Gadsden flag T-shirt. They'd have to include, all of your Twitter posts. They'd have to include, your I love the Proud Boys button. They'd have to include all of those things because they're bringing these things as evidence against you in these cases. And this is what we're seeing with these January 6 related charges. The guys who are still in jail. It's people like Jeremy Brown. The evidence is planted. I don't know how to. It is so clear that the FBI actually planted this evidence on Jeremy Brown because he was a whistleblower. He was actually approached by the FBI prior to January 6th, and they attempted to recruit him to be a confidential human source for the January 6th event, and so he said no. He spoke out and was charged for his for January 6th, and in the search, charged for these grenades that magically the FBI found. They love to lose and find explosives apparently at the FBI. So.
Do you have any proof that it was planted?
His lawyer certainly does, and she's made this case extensively in his trial. In his case, there's an extensive amount of evidence that she has presented that in fact these are planted weapons. Yes.
What type of evidence is that?
Hand grenades. They said they found hand
Yeah.
grenades in his possession.
What's the evidence that she brought?
There's a lot of evidence with regards to the actual FBI, the investigation, the questioning, all of that back and forth, how it was found, where it was found, all of that. So, I have not looked deeply into the tit for tat on that logistics, but it has been well documented in the case that it is very likely planted evidence. Yeah.
What's the next step in that case?
Well, a habeas corpus has been filed because he is currently, at this point, in FCI Atlanta. They are not bringing these guys to the states where these cases are at. Jeremy's case is a federal case, but in the state of Florida. So he's being held in federal custody in Georgia. That makes no sense. His attorney has filed a writ of habeas corpus, so that we can actually, we can produce the body, if you will, and the evidence and reasoning why they are still holding him. But that has not been done in the case. What we're seeing again and again is a U.S. attorney or a judge who is not presenting that next legal step. So not giving that authorization, not presenting the motion. Many of these cases, these charges are being dismissed. But in some of these cases where we see some holdouts, perhaps some folks who might not have voted for the current president, they are certainly doing everything they can to withhold that authorization, that next legal step, including turning off phones and fax machines, literally not taking calls.
Interesting. That's you guys try to fax them or call them or something like that?
Yes. Myself, the lawyers, the attorneys, Congressman Michael Cloud, who I want to thank for actually for 3 days having a full staff person on this issue, looking into what is the holdup with each of these cases? Why are these individuals still being held despite being pardoned? Trying to understand the legal parameters, and what they've done is run it again and again up against the legal reality, the wall, is that there is still lawfare being practiced, and there are individuals, just as we see with the motions against Trump's treasury issues, all of these activist judges, we have these activist judges, these activist U.S. attorneys still withholding freedom from these January 6th defendants.
Yeah, Michael Cloud's a good guy. He just introduced a bill called the Shush Act that would deregulate oppressors from not only the NFA but from the GCA as well.
No, he's been very, very engaged. 3-4 days working actively, trying to see what he could do and to see what the U.S. Marshals could do to use his congressional reach to help, and we're very grateful. But he ran up against the same wall. The deep state still exists. The Department of Justice has only been so purged of individuals who are willing to use their legal position as a weapon. And it has not been a peaceful transition of power. It's been a mildly unpeaceful transition of power so far.
I mean, these things are just so infuriating. It's like, take the L, walk away, let these guys loose. This is crazy.
They don't. Have you talked to any of the J6ers that have been released?
A lot, and that's what's so, I think, one of the most frustrating things is to see so many great stories, so many great victories where people are released. We are seeing these charges in many cases dismissed. We are seeing folks able to get on with their lives, back home with their families. There are certainly some questions we're still working out, but there's a lot of wins. There also is a lot of work to do. I talked to Joe Biggs today, one of the 5 pardoned Proud Boys, and again also a decorated veteran. He found out today that while he was in jail, they court-martialed him for being for crimes against the government without informing him. So shows up to the VA today to try to get his benefits restored, and they literally trespassed him off VA property. and said that he would be arrested if he remained on property. This is a Purple Heart veteran, someone who has fought and been injured for his country, fought twice combat veteran, and this is how he was treated today because of the January 6th lawfare that's still going on. So we've still got some problems to work out, and we need to be focusing on them. That is why it is so frustrating to still have these 6 individuals incarcerated. The first step was, get everyone released. That's step 1. We're still fighting for that 3
Yeah,
weeks
one
later.
of the things that really interests me is about the whole J6 thing is in case of Enrique Torres, the leader of the Proud Boys, who was arrested for J6.
The white supremacists, you mean?
Yeah.
The Cuban white supremacists, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
he was arrested for J6 before he even got to DC. He wasn't at J6, but they arrested him for J6.
They arrested him to keep him out of the grounds from J6. Yes, on January 5th, he was arrested for the flag burning and having unlawful weapons. Somebody had gifted him, 2 decorated magazines for a firearm that had like a logo or something on it, and he had brought them into the city. They were charged with that. He did a year of time for that flag burning, which, by the way, one of the most frustrating things is I was physically present the day that incident occurred, and it was not Enrique who lit that flag on fire. I can tell you, with every 100% act, my own eyes, I was literally talking to him as it happened. So that man, he is a very, very noble leader. When he says he is noble, he is. He took that for the team as the leader of this organization, and yes, he spent a year. He was the first arrest. He was the first January 6th arrest, I call it, because it was actually on the day before. I spoke about him on January 5th on the steps of the Supreme Court when I spoke there the day before. And then, of course, January 6th happened. And, once that trial began, he was only out for a short period of time before he was rearrested for his January 6th case. And so he spent the vast majority of the last 4 years in jail. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. There's a conspiracy around Ray Epps. Do you know anything about that?
I know a few little things about the conspiracy around Ray Epps, and it's interesting actually. Now that we have the January 6ers out, you can really start to hear their stories. I've got a chance to talk, spend some time talking with Ryan Samsel, who, if you are familiar with any of the footage, he is the kid in the denim jacket who Ray Epps whispers to, and everyone is always asked, what did he say? What did he say? And it's fascinating to actually start to hear those stories and to hear that Ray Epps actually told him to push on the gate, that Ray Epps was a don't pull, push. So, these are interesting facts. There's a lot we still need to know about Ray Epps.
Let's go into who Ray Epps is first, because a lot of people probably don't know who he is.
Yeah, Ray Epps is a pretty. You might Google him because he's an interesting character. Gentleman who was in DC on January 5th, on January 6th, and is filmed repeatedly through that period of time, telling people we're going to go into the Capitol, encouraging people to make that trip into the Capitol. And throughout the day on January 6th, he seems to be located at almost every interesting flashpoint we see.
The interesting thing was on the 5th, he was like, "We're going to go into the Capitol," and everybody's yelling, "Fed! Fed! Fed! Fed!"
Trying to...
Correct. We already knew. And, it's something that here in D.C., when we had protests for the Stop the Steal, both of the Stop the Steals before the January 6th, January 5th, January 6th event, we have often a lot of Antifa in town. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of volatility. What we saw on January 5th and January 6th was an eerie quiet, right? That was a lot, I would say, indicated. Ray Epps' hyping the crowd was sort of that was the common. That's what and you would see people boo because we know that we know that's the kind of thing that the feds are going to do. They're going to try to get us into conflict. That's the kind of thing we expect. And so it was interesting as you see the footage throughout the day on January 6th, how he manages to be at so many of these points, that first breach point, that second breach point, the line there on the plaza, and his presence again. And once unfortunately Ashley Babbitt has been shot, you see him and individuals that are seen with him throughout the day depart. So that, you know, it's a very interesting case study to observe, and I think it's really going to be
Well,
fascinating.
Ray
As
Epps
January 6th start to
wasn't he
tell.
like the most wanted on the FBI list, and for like a couple hours, and then they pulled him off. It's like, hey, no, that's our guy. Take it
Well,
down.
yeah, and
Take it
that's
down.
kind of Ryan Samsel's story. He was when he was interrogated, they pulled him aside, and he was describing Ray Epps, and you know, they pulled him aside, and they said, no, 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 that guy's the voice of reason. And they've coached Ryan Samsel. They coached him on how he should be speaking about Ray Epps, and because he was not, you know, fulfilling their role, their script, uh, they actually paused the investigation and brought it back multiple times. You know, it was because actually Ryan Samsel would not be quiet, would not take a plea deal, and would not be quiet about Ray Epps, that Ray Epps actually received any criminal charges for January 6th whatsoever. It was after that testimony that you really saw Ray Epps be addressed as a possible, you know, someone who needed charges.
Well, they eventually charged him with something, and didn't they give him like a suspended sentence?
1752 restricted area charge, and that is they gave him 6 months probation.
Okay. So there he is whispering into the guy's ear, and then the guy immediately, they push and pull on the gate and break through, and
Well,
he
yeah, and
walks away.
see, and this is the thing that's what's interesting is that this is, you know, Ryan Samsel has been very clear. He didn't really whisper; he's yelling. It's very loud at the moment when he's actually saying it, and uh, Ryan is pulling on the gate, and what he actually told them is, no, no, we've got guys, push, push, and so you see the rest, you see the gate be pushed, and then you see as you watch that footage a little further. Ryan actually helps that officer. You know, there's an officer who's knocked down in that process. He actually stops to help the officer up. So it's a very interesting study because what we start to understand is how a single operative can actually manipulate individuals who are not. You know, you don't need everybody there engaged in a false flag, knowing that they are part of a false flag. You can literally have individuals manipulating the situations around them and in that manner create a reaction. And this is frankly what we see, I think, January 6th repeatedly, both with the infiltrators, the agitators in the crowd, but also the law enforcement themselves. Once they started firing on, you know, civilians who were prior to that peaceful, you know, that agitation, that anger. In fact, many January 6th defendants will talk about a cop pulling them into a fight, pulling them into the building even. We've seen many, many cases. So as these January 6ers come out and they're able to tell their stories, you're going to hear some pretty shocking things.
That's crazy. All of this, you know, between Trump offering the National Guard, Pelosi turning it down, it's the mayor, I forget her name, this, you know, activist lefty lady,
Yep,
Bowser.
Yep.
You know, it was up to, you know, Nancy Pelosi and Bowser to secure, and Trump offered all sorts of ways to do that, and they turned it down. And it seems, and I don't know if you're familiar with the pipe bombs, but that's like another crazy thing. It's how is it
They've
in?
deleted evidence. They've denied evidence. You know, officers have, you know, have perjured themselves on the stand. We saw Joe Biden literally pardoning the select committee. There's no reason to pardon a group of people who did a good job for America. We know what that pardon is about. It is about the fact that it was a partisan witch hunt, and it wasn't just on a politician. It was on the American people. It was on innocent Americans who came to exercise their First Amendment,
Yeah.
and it continued on for 4 years, and frankly, is continuing on still to this day. There are still individuals that are victims of that weaponized attack.
What I kind of find interesting, and I was talking to John before the show, or actually we talked during the beginning of the show. You see Mad Max Waters at the Department of Education, and a bunch of, you know, lefty nutniks. It's like, let us in, let us in. It's like, oh, is this like January 6th? What's going on here? You're gonna storm the building? I mean, isn't it amazing to see how they react? And
with
when
impunity. Yeah, with impunity. They have no fear of targeting Congress members. They have no fear of physical assault. Nancy Mace has been assaulted here on Capitol
Yep.
grounds earlier this year even. They have no qualms about taking over the building, taking over the rotunda, chaining themselves, gluing themselves to the tunnel doors. They've done all of this.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it is a reasonable slap on the wrist. It's a fine. It's a, thank you very much. Go home and don't do that.
I
It
mean,
is
if you roll
not.
back, the left was
Yeah.
protesting at the Supreme Court for the
Yeah.
abortion. They're in front of who is its house? They're
In front of Robert's house.
I mean, they're going nutso on
Yeah.
the Supreme Court justices' homes.
Well, one thing that I find interesting is that a bunch of Palestinian protesters rushed Congress and they refused to leave the rotunda in Congress. And my question at the time was, are they going to be charged with insurrection?
No, they're probably not even going to be charged with trespassing, to be fair.
They weren't.
Well,
They were released.
First off, nobody was charged with insurrection. No J6ers,
Right.
Donald Trump,
That is
nobody.
Yeah, I know, but people, no one even.
No,
claimed
nor,
that.
but there were those charged with seditious conspiracy. They won't charge them with that. They also would not charge them with obstruction of an official proceeding, the 1512. They're not going to charge them with that. They're not going to charge them with civil disorder. All of these things would be charges that, 5, 10, 20 years, that's what those possible sentences can hold. This is why the Department of Justice, weaponized against the January 6ers, chose these specific charges because they could add up to serious time. And that's the difference that we see. You're not going to see, leftist protesters be given those charges, those group of aggregate of charges that can give real time. To be fair, here's what else you're not going to see. You're not going to see the FBI agent in a little van at the Piggly Wiggly looking for the blue-haired girl who was protesting for the Palestinian at the Capitol. They're not investing the kind of resources to literally hunt down individuals for misdemeanors that they did for January 6th. And so, we're still working on getting that balance of justice back. It has not yet been restored. I think it's possible. I think we're moving in the right direction, but
Let me ask you another question. I saw some Democratic senators tweeting out that 6 Capitol Police people lost their lives. Now, when you look into it, they died within a month of January 6th, but none of them actually died from anything resulting from January 6th.
Well, that just depends on how you feel about suicides, in the District of Columbia. There are certainly some sketchy details with regards to some of those deaths, and I don't mean that J6ers are the question. The deep state is the question. Why did these officers who knew what happened on January 6th lose their lives or commit suicide in the short weeks afterwards? We in the January 6th community have huge questions about that. The reality, however, is the people who lost their lives on January 6th were civilians. They were Ashley Babbitt, they were Roseanne Boylan, they were Benjamin Phillips, they were Kevin Greason, and the next day, Brian Signick, who was an officer, he lost his life due to a heart condition that may or may not have been exacerbated by the situation. To be fair, when you were running around and breathing in the pepper spray that you tried to spray on the crowd and it blew back in your face, that happened to officers multiple times. There was a lot of chaos, and in fact, some of that chaos certainly was not good for the officers. I feel, all of us feel very bad for the entire situation. Namely, there are officers who were just as entrapped that day, just as roped into a very difficult situation as were the January 6ers. And then there were other officers that day that literally were there to entrap people and have perjured themselves and have lied on the stand and continue to lie to this day to put January 6ers unlawfully and wrongfully in jail.
So I want to stop and make a point or recap a point that you made, that there was suicides by Capitol Police that could be suspicious, is what you're saying.
Correct.
That you're saying they possibly didn't play ball and all of a sudden they're gone.
Yeah. It was a very interesting few weeks after January 6th that we saw that grouping of officer deaths for in any situation when you see something as politically volatile as January 6th, and then people involved in the leadership there lose their lives, commit suicide. These are very suspicious cases. So we'd like some investigations actually into what happened to those officers. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the first time I heard of that, and that's very interesting. And I'm sorry, Crumb.
Hold on.
The interesting thing is statistics.
Being a journalist, I have to ask: is there any evidence that shows that there was something malicious going on with their suicides?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. As a journalist, I guess that depends on what kind of journalist you are. If you are an investigative journalist, somebody who plays the odds and statistics, the likelihood that there would be 5 suicides in a population of people that just happen to have recently, within a few week period, been involved in a major altercation like that, that does raise some questions. And if it doesn't raise some questions, then we have to start to wonder what kind of journalist you are. That's the kind of thing that we come to investigate. And that's why we're saying, there needs to be investigation. We should not just be taking the fact that, magically, it just happened to be there were 5 guys who did not have any indication of suicide in their families beforehand. And now, after this event, they were so traumatized that suicide occurred. If that's the case, we need to investigate to make sure that the other officers are getting proper mental care. But it begs. I
am an investigative journalist, and what we do in investigations, yes, when we see something like that, we investigate, but we can't go on causation and correlation. We have to go on the hard evidence.
Well, yes, and you should then, and that's exactly the evidence that should be investigated. What were those officers saying in that day? What do their family members say? There are still officers actually that continue to speak out. In fact, one of the officers that was here, a Metropolitan Police officer here in January 6th, he's actually been charged. He's been charged because he communicated with Enrique Chayo, with the Proud Boys, as he had done many, many times beforehand. And they ultimately, rather than gather information from him on what that intel was and use that in his case, in fact, he offered to testify, attempted to testify in the Proud Boys case, that there was no nefarious intent, that there was no plan. But because he wasn't preaching the right message, he got charges. And he actually was convicted on those charges. So that same lawfare that is happening to these individuals was targeted onto law enforcement who spoke out. And this is one of the things we have to be very aware of as we are in an era where whistleblowers are going to be telling us the truth about what has been going on in the previous regime. It is very dangerous to be a whistleblower. And it was much more dangerous when what you were facing is the potential of utter lawfare, targeting by, there will be doxing, there will be targeting by the unknown public, if not by your own government, and by of course the FBI and others who can come after you and use those weapons of government against you. So this is where we need to start asking some of the questions. They make it really easy to look the other way, but when you look beneath that onion skin, the answers they give lead to more questions and graver concerns.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm just saying that there's investigative journalists, and then there's the Alex Jones type investigative journalist that.
Well, no, I agree, but I would hope that somebody would go talk to the families, ask what had happened with that, find out more information, find out the families don't want to talk to you, they're paranoid, whatever. That's the investigation that actually starts to reveal, what is there. It's similar to actually the investigation that has gone on for years on Seth Rich. There's a lot of things that have been found out over time on the Seth Rich case because of that ongoing investigation. But some of what we found out was, wow, people get a little paranoid if you start talking about Seth Rich too much. That in itself is news.
I think one of the things being an investigative journalist that a lot of people get frustrated with is, like, when I look into something and they're like, well, you've been looking into it for 2 weeks. Why haven't you released anything? And the answer is because usually investigations take a lot longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's true.
And
it's true. And I think, that's one of the frustrating things with activism actually as well, because sometimes it takes longer than 2 weeks. And what we're having right now to do is sort of weeks and months worth of activism in a very short period of time, because people are literally rotting in jail, but for those efforts. And so, we've been, over the past week, extensive calls to action. We're making 5-6 different calls a day to different Congress members, to different offices, to the DC U.S. Attorney, to the Attorney General's office, making that public outcry heard, making our concerns heard, and continuing to try to raise that volume. There's so much going on in the administration. I feel that, and many of the January 6ers who are still, incarcerated and struggling with potential future incarceration, because there are a few who have those J6 related surge charges that potentially could be asked to surrender in the days to come. These folks they're nervous. They feel left behind. They felt that there was something, this promise was going to indicate a new era of their lives. And what we're finding is, the struggle continues, and the lawfare continues, and we have not yet won back our Department of Justice, nor our justice system.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, everything that is going on. What did you think of the reaction of the left to the pardons?
Well, I have to laugh a little bit, mostly because, as founder of the J6 Pardon Project, I take a great deal of pride at their meltdowns. They were very upset about Stewart Rhodes and the other. Oh my goodness, the violent insurrectionists, the violent ones they let out. I was very proud of the work that I did to ensure that those individuals, all January 6 defendants, were able to receive that pardon, as many as possible, I believe. And so, I take a great deal of pride in that. But what I find sad is that we give that much attention to what is really a very small sliver of the population. The vast majority of people I meet, even here in very Democrat DC, they are very happy that my friends are out of jail. They're very happy the January 6ers have been pardoned. They want to move past this era in American history. I think we all would love that. It's this very crazy, rabid left component of the population that just they live for suffering of their political enemies. And as we see, the sedition hunters go back to their roots as Antifa. They are making threats. There are death threats about January 6ers on all of their posts, on all of their social media, their private chats and such that we keep track of and are monitored. The Antifa and the radical left is very angry and potentially dangerous towards January 6ers, or frankly anyone who is supporting the president's agenda.
Yep. We had a super chat over on Rumble. And if I don't see your chats for some reason, I was wondering, it's like the chats are slow today. And then I went and checked the channels, and it looks like we're not getting all the chats coming through for some reason. But I just want to say that Johnny 3 Bar said, I may be broke, but I'm trying to do my part. Thank you, John, for all that you do. So thank you, Johnny 3 Bar. I would have put it up on the screen, but like I said, not all the chats are coming through for some reason. And you guys are still there?
Oh, I'm still here. Yep. No, I got you. We're good. I didn't want to interrupt chat business. I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I just wanted to let you know, because like usually you put up a lot more chats, but I noticed it was slow. So I went back and I looked, and it looks like we're not getting all the chats through. Well, there must be some type of back end error, but whatever. Yeah. Fluffy Bunny Arsenal says they are a death cult driven by hate.
They are. Agreed. I cannot disagree.
And that is true. That is definitely true. What really surprised me is that on the 2016 election, there was on J21. People don't remember J21, but there was a lot of violence.
Oh yeah, they burned a limousine. They busted up the windows of all sorts of buildings.
Yeah. There was a whole part of the district where it was just chaotic. And I know people who were coming here that if you were entering from one of the metro stations, they literally were attacking everyone at the certain metro station. It was very volatile. It was very volatile on the first inauguration, certainly.
Jordan Vinro, owner of Gideon Optics, is in the chat. Gideon Optics will be doing the sponsorship of the channel to kick off the Rumble, the Rumble only thing. So, yep, there you go. Also, X Tech is coming on as a sponsor as well. I cannot wait till we go over to Rumble. We might actually do it sooner, but right now it's still March 3rd is going to be our big kickoff show.
Oh, it's 2 days before my birthday. So,
well, happy early birthday.
thank you very much. Thank you very much.
My birthday's coming up very soon. Only a few days away. Yeah, I'll be 49.
Aw, you're right. It's so close to the 50s.
Old as hell. Old as hell. Yeah, LA Vino Latino, from LA, lives out in LA, says Antifa did damage in LA during the Summer of Love 2020.
Yeah,
And they
very much
absolutely
so.
absolutely did that. But it seems like that all gets downplayed for some reason.
Yeah, repeatedly. And look, I can give you some of the reason why we're paying for some of that. We learned this about the sedition hunters as we were, going through, trying to understand where this organization is getting their capacity. And I was able to, through researching the Department of Homeland Security Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant Program, identify about 20 different organizations that are Antifa affiliated or have members that are Antifa affiliated in the leadership that were receiving, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the
I think she froze up. You're freezing up.
domestic terrorists. And so that's what they're using the funds for. The literal definition of what a sedition hunter is, using computers, using the internet, using OSINT technology to search the internet for domestic terrorists, as we know, those bad white supremacists and conservatives. So we're paying for this. We're paying for the creation of these radical leftist groups through our own, through our own organizations, through our own government funded operations. And frankly, we're seeing with the uncovering of what goes on with US aid and some of the other that in accounting, what's the word I'm looking investigating that is being done there, the accounting for things, the audit, that's it, the auditing. We're seeing, there's huge corruption, there's massive financial corruption, and we are probably paying for all of our own enemies. We're paying for many of these protests, and that's why we don't see those folks get arrested. The government has a financial return on investment to protect if they're spending all that money to put the protesters there in the first place.
Yeah, USAID is an interesting case study because looking at what they funded, not only have they funded a bunch of terrorist-related charities that have direct connections to terrorism, but they also have been giving millions of dollars to a bunch of anti-gun groups as well, and that's all being cut off. And I think that's why, there's a big pushback on the left to stop the auditing of the USAID and stop, whatever, because their slush fund is being turned off, and I think that scares the hell out of them.
Well, yeah, and look, that slush fund goes through every organization. We can't wait till Doge hits the Bureau of Prisons, because we are wasting billions and billions of dollars that are just being put into corrupt pockets. We hear story after story of a prison that ordered 11 pool tables and only one of them is still in the facility. The other 10 go missing. 100 TVs that were ordered for the facility. There's only 10 that are in use. The other 90 go missing. This happens again and again and again in our Bureau of Prisons. And that's before we start talking about the illegal drug trade that the guards engage with on a regular basis. The corruption is so very deep. And we're wasting billions and billions of dollars to basically create prison systems that facilitate recidivism, that bring people back. We know for a fact that when you are put in egregious condition, it is more likely, statistically far more likely, that you will return to jail than if you are treated in a fair manner. And that can go right down to the temperature. You can measure it by whether or not that temperature is 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees over that comfort zone that we all know the human body enjoys.
Mhm.
The more you put people outside of that comfort zone, 2 degrees of extra heat in the summer in those unbearable conditions, it increases the recidivism of those individuals. It
Yeah, well,
actually, how we're treating people brings people back to jail.
yeah, I think we have a prison industrial complex right now,
Yeah.
and I'm not for socialism in any form, but I think that these private prisons are an issue because these private prisons are for profit. So the more people that gets locked
Yeah.
up, more profit that they make, and I think that's wrong. I think we really, really need to reform the prison system. If you look at the United States rate of incarceration, like compared to every other country in the world, we are higher. In For example, for like drugs, we lock so many people up for drugs. And they're like, if you look at Portugal, for example, they reformed it. Instead of sending you to prison, you get sent to a rehab facility and whatnot. And that has been majorly successful at
Yeah.
cutting down the drug rate and also the crime rate.
Yeah.
But we're locking people up together that need help, and they're just getting more training to become better criminals.
Well, yeah, and here's what's worse. We're locking them up pre-trial because it's a money-making opportunity. So
Exactly.
the US Marshals, their main job has always been as the individuals who transport prisoners from the court to the jail where they're going to be serving their time. And before, we saw the modern explosion of pretrial detention. That was really their only the one little leg of the journey. But now what we're seeing is a huge uptick in the use of pretrial detention almost ubiquitously. And so now those US Marshals have all sorts there's many trips back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And there are facilities around the country now that have just contracted for the US Marshals specifically, private organizations like the GEO Group, that was holding Benjamin Martin earlier this month before they sent him to the Federal Correctional Institute there in California. It is an entirely contracted facility just for the U.S. Marshals, just for this circuit of transport they do for pretrial detention. So even how we are operating the law, the massive increase in pretrial detention is a financial moneymaker. It has made the U.S. Marshals now able to sell contracts, make all of those same monies that we see for the prison system in that pretrial component. So we're finding more ways to torture people and make money off of it.
Yeah, well, look at it this way. Go back to the drug thing really fast. 55% of all people that's incarcerated in the United States are for nonviolent drug offenses. And it would be cheaper to get those people into rehab facilities and get them rehabbed than to put them in prison. But if you break it down per person, it's about one third of the cost to
Right.
to do that instead of housing them, and the success rate of that is like 3 times as much as a prison
Right.
sentence. But you get like 3 times the return for one third the cost, and then you empty out 55% of the prisons, then you actually save money that way too,
Correct.
and
Correct. And these prisons need to be, yeah, look, they're going to need to empty some of these and repair these facilities. Many of them are completely dilapidated, a complete ignoring of any maintenance for decades and decades, ceilings that fall down, ducts that fall on people's heads, the inability to use the kitchen. There are multiple prison facilities. They cannot serve hot food despite having a full kitchen facility because it has been so deteriorated. Flooding, dampness, mold, failed plumbing. These facilities are, before we start to get to the problem with the guards, the problem with the corruption, the problem with drugs being sold, rape, physical and sexual assault going on from the guards to the inmates, not just from other inmates, but literally the correctional officers themselves committing these crimes. Before we go into any of that, these facilities are literally falling down on their heads.
yeah, definitely, it is, and the amount of like Anthony Smith brought up a good thing about different sentences or different crimes that it's like our friend Matt Hoover. It was doing 5 years for actually advertising on selling advertising a card with a picture on it, and they charged him with conspiracy, and he's serving 5 years for that. Yet there's people that do stuff to the most vulnerable population in the United States, and they get a lot less than that.
Mhm. Correct. Correct. We have almost the system is almost upside down. And I think Americans are very frustrated because part of we see these egregious crimes. We see the child sex crimes, the trafficking crimes. We see massive amounts of fentanyl. We see the deaths. We see all of this violent crime, and we're stunned repeatedly at the individuals walking out in a short period of time. And then we see story after story after story of someone who seems to have just run afoul of the wrong individuals. And frankly, so many times now it seems to be there seems to be some political affiliation. And so it's immensely frustrating to see people doing 5, 10, 18 years. There's a state senator by the name of John Woods. He was the first first elected official to endorse Trump back in 2016. He was basically entrapped by a campaign finance scheme that everyone else in the trap managed to get off. All of the really rich guys in the scheme managed to get off, but
Well,
somehow this
first
one
off, let
guy.
me say this. The campaign finance laws are so sophisticated, you're guilty of something. It doesn't matter if you're completely
Right.
honest, trying to color way inside the lines, not going near the gray or anything like that.
Right.
The campaign finance laws are intentionally very sophisticated that virtually anybody could be held guilty.
And it's used in this weaponized way in this way. And John Woods got 18 years. He still has 12 of those years to serve. There are several political prisoners. We're still advocating to be pardoned by the president while he remains in office, because it needs to be done. We need to rectify some of these egregious situations where individuals, have been charged for basically political speech, for political engagement.
Yeah, we're coming up to the hour. We're not quite there yet, so we only have a few more minutes left. And I do want to get to this question: what is the J6 project going to do once everyone gets out?
Yeah, we'll be very glad. We'll be very glad when that happens, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done with regards to the individuals and restoring their lives. We're a big supporter of the J6 Road Home Project. We're a big supporter of American Patriot Relief that continues to operate that J6 hotline, 877 to save J6. And we encourage folks, as they are getting their lives back, as they are going through those difficult times, that they reach out. There are folks.
It looks like Susan froze up again.
Also folks who are struggling with relationship issues, job issues. Jobs are going to be really a complicated issue for these folks, because they do still have that the internet. That crime will remain on the internet forever, and we are seeing people struggling with that. So we would love to get to the aftercare part of our mission, but unfortunately we are still in the process of securing freedom for all the January 6ers.
What do you think the chances of the final 6 being released are?
I think very high. I think that the problem that we're seeing is really a struggle with that crossover between the previous administration and the next administration. And as these confirmations are solidified, as Pam Bondi is able to fill out, those U.S. attorneys underneath her, as Kash Patel is able to come in and really get operational control of the FBI. These are things that I think will be very useful. And I think the public outcry is becoming very very clear that these last 6 January 6 defendants, we're not going to just accept. Oops. Well, you can keep a few of them. We the January 6 community are certainly a no man left behind type of group, and so we fully expect it will happen. It's just going to be a matter of time between the squeaky wheel getting and the grease being applied. So we'll see how long that takes.
Ting Ting, long time no see.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome. Yeah, we're not exactly the biggest Pam Bondi fans here. I will say that.
And as well, with Ed Martin. To be fair, he is one of the few U.S. attorneys right now, one of the 2 U.S. attorneys that does have his name on a J6 indictment. So, there is some real, questions that need to be asked as to how the president's intent, which we understood to be very clear, that he wanted to end the grave injustice that January 6th has been. And in fact, he made a personal promise to Jeremy Brown's mother that he would be released. Somewhere there's a disconnect between the president's intent and how that is getting implemented. And, Pam Bondi, Ed Martin, we're kind of looking in your direction, you guys, because that's kind of where all the problems could be fixed, but aren't getting fixed. So
Yeah, I just don't trust her because of her past and her prior actions.
Well, yeah, there she does have a history in Florida, and Florida was one of the most prolific states as far as January 6ers, and certainly a lot more could have been done to protect the January 6th defendants by the state of Florida. Other states were more protective, rightfully so, and we saw less cases of January 6th defendants really being targeted by a very weaponized FBI in cases where we saw sheriffs willing, to defend their citizenry from what is what is an overreaching government. Find a good red state, you guys, seriously, a good red state. And if it looks a little purple, and if you've got some questions about it, no, go redder, because these are the states that actually stood up in many cases and made a difference.
Miriam 1965 says, "Cash will fix this. You watch." I hope so. Cash,
Hope so.
You met him with me, didn't you, Rich? Down in Tennessee?
Did I? No, I don't think so.
Oh, you weren't with us? Oh.
It's so funny. As much as we meet up and do things together, we go our separate ways. And yeah, I didn't get to meet him.
And this is the other thing I want to say. I suspect Cash would love to fix it, but we're going to need lots and lots of new FBI guys. We're at the end of Die Hard, right? We're going to need some new FBI guys. That's where we're at, because they're going to have to they're going to have to clear them out. The corruption is so deep, and on so many levels. And we see the pushback from these FBI agents saying, well, even if you had even a cursory involvement in January 6th, our jobs are on the chopping block. Well, of course, you operated completely fascist investigations. You pointed guns. You SWAT raided homes, pointed guns at babies. Women have had miscarriages because of your tactics. Of course, you all need to go. And so, I feel it's going to be a bigger job than we really expect. It's going to take Cash or it's going to take all of them a minute. And frankly, I think we might have to see some leadership changes. We saw this in Trump's first administration. We aren't still talking about Reince Priebus anymore, you guys. For a reason.
Gosh.
We had to switch some people out, and we may need to do that.
There was one person that got arrested at J6, and from what I heard, his 8-year-old was held at gunpoint.
Yeah, correct. And that's common. And actually, what's really the J6ers are starting to post their interrogation videos. They're able to speak now, and you're going to see some of the most frightening and egregious behavior. Our FBI was literally a militant enemy army against American citizens who were there on January 6th.
Yeah, we'll have to see what is going on. I do know some people that were questioned because their phones showed that they were near the Capitol, but they never went into the Capitol. So they were pulling all that data off phones and all that metadata. That's all,
If you flew into town, God forbid that be the day you decided to travel to DC. If your credit card was used anywhere in the region, all of this evidence has been reported.
Yeah, Bank of America was just handing over all the credit card information, all the
and you may be on many of these watch lists that so many January 6ers also have done. You could be on these lists and not even know it. There are thousands and thousands of individuals that were pre-charges, pre-indictment, that were under investigation. So you might be being watched by the government and be completely unaware.
Well, I probably did use my credit cards in the DC area on that day because I live here. So
same problem.
I don't know how they would be able to tell. It was like, oh, he did the same exact thing he did every day. But who knows? I mean,
right.
Luckily, I think it's the hunting down of the so-called J6ers. I think I think it was I think that portion of it is at least over for the next few years.
Well, by the government, yes, but
Yeah.
I will say we have already had some indication that there are disgruntled former investigators who are willing to contact your employer, contact your apartment complex, your landlord, and do that exact same thing that Antifa does, the exact
Unbelievable.
same thing to try to undermine your ability to keep that job. So it's going to get a little messy. I think the battlefield has changed, but the incoming fire is still very, very heavy.
I do know that like Pennsylvania, like Josh Shapiro said that he's going to hold them responsible by using Pennsylvania law, even though he can't because you just can't. I mean, nothing
Yeah.
was done in Pennsylvania.
Boy,
Well, the
I mean,
governor of
if he had a
Illinois-
law degree, he would know better, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the governor of Illinois issued a statement, a completely unlawful, discriminatory statement that no January 6er is allowed to work in state government there in Illinois. So we see the bias even institutionally being implemented in these blue states. It's going to be a battle, and these folks are going to have to, for the rest of their lives, fight this battle until we figure out how to rectify the disease that the left has had, this mental break of just hating on everything right. Until we fix that, they're always going to hate January 6ers. They're always going to seek to target them.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, we've been on for over an hour. I want to thank you for coming on. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, you can go to, of course, follow me on Twitter at Trumpertarian. We're doing a lot of calls to action right now, working on getting the remaining January 6th hostages free, and certainly all the information there. You can also go to the J6 Pardon Project, www.j6pardonproject.com. Find out what we've been doing throughout the year, and we haven't had a chance to update. We've been celebrating, and then immediately right back in the fight. So we're hoping to be able to update the website with a wonderful, yay, we did it, banner, but we are not quite there yet.
Yeah,
Wow.
you're getting close though. All right, thank you so much. We'll be back to tomorrow with a brand new guest, I think. Rich?
Working on it.
All right, all right. We have some really cool guests coming up pretty soon. And I think
One person I asked is sick with the flu, so
okay, well, yeah. Like a few people we're gonna have on is like Isaac Botkin. He's gonna be coming up. We have some really cool guests planned, and you have to let you know the focus of the show is shifting slowly but surely. We're gonna be doing more. We're gonna still have guests on, but it's gonna be more of a discussion of stuff like this, like J6. So we're gonna have another show that's about something else. Another show. It's gonna be like instead of just a free for all, it's gonna be a topic driven show about like things that are going on locally, and I think that's going to be really, really cool. All right, guys, we are out of here. Thank you, Rich, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. And with that, we're out.